What's going on, world? You are now tuned into the Bong Talk sit-down series, and I am your host, Nappy2000. And real quick, I want to give a shout-out to my sponsors. I'm going to put them out on the screen for you so you guys can see them. I want to give a shout-out to Bust Down Worldwide, Happy Trees, Plain Jane, Shrubs, El Toro, and Sweets for constantly supporting me. And you can also catch this episode on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. But today, I have a very special guest. He is actually a very, very special man within the cannabis world. If you've seen anything High Times, he probably has something to do with it. I have the man, Jon Cappetta, in the building.
Thank you very much. It's a very nice intro. I do want to make clear, High Times is a 48-year-old publication, so if you saw anything before 5 years ago, I had nothing to do with it.
Most definitely.
But since then, yeah, I got my hands in a bunch.
He's not that old, y'all.
Not that old yet. Not that old.
Yeah, so, man, so talk about that, the journey of even being able to be a part of a history like that, because I think we've all grown up seeing this magazine or just seeing High Times somewhere growing up.
So when I was in college, and like even before that, but like when I was in college specifically, like I didn't have Playboy centerfolds on my walls. I had Bud centerfolds from High Times. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so like I've followed this magazine and like collected this magazine for a long time, and then actually, I was working at an agency, and just kind of like the stars aligned with, I knew some guys that were involved in the acquisition of High Times, and I was just kind of in their ear with the right things they should be doing. And eventually it got to a point where I guess I'd nagged them enough that they were like, hey, just shut up and come do it. You know what I mean? So
persistence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I've been in this role for going on 4 years now. Before that, I was just the media guy helping communicate what was going on with the brand. And now I am the VP of content, which means I run the magazine, the .com, and all the socials. And, you know, as someone who grew up on this publication, like I definitely was in the right place, the right time. But like High Times has kind of gone through a lot of changes over its almost 50 years.
Yeah.
And most recently, it was primarily an events company that not everyone loved. So for me, I knew the realities of print media. I knew I wasn't walking into like, you know, a cash factory or anything like that. But I kind of saw this as like, if I could help restore this icon, then that's like me earning my place in the industry. You know what I mean? And, you know, I guess people look at it differently from the outside, right? But like, even when I was on the outside, one thing that I kind of always looked at High Times as was like a lighthouse. And the cannabis industry is so huge, but like they were the ones that were always like shining the light on like the real dopest shit. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
So like being able to like, you know, kind of be behind that spotlight now is something that I take like super seriously. And also like, you know,
it's the whole perception pretty much that, you know, it's even if for people who don't smoke, they may see it.
Well,
you know, you present it to them.
There's that, but it's also like this is a bucket list thing for a lot of people. Yeah. You know what I mean? So like kind of, and like this is like maybe just my own like arrogance, but like sussing out like whether or not like this is gonna sound really awful, but like deciding whether or not someone deserves that light, like if they're actually like a legacy brand, or like they deserve to be here, or like, you know, like they care about the plant as opposed to just somebody who's just coming in trying to make a buck. Like that's a really cool badge to wear. You know what I mean? And like, not to sound like a cop with it, but like that's like
you're keeping the integrity of it.
Well, I get to help curate a culture that I love very dearly. And like I used to, like, when I was a kid and I was like throwing concerts, like I used to really respect DJs, and not necessarily because like they were like a one-man band or anything like that, but just because the way they could like read a room and control it, I found super interesting. And like I've always tried to do that with my writing, like lead a conversation. You know what I mean? Like really like make it feel like I'm talking to you as opposed to just like you're reading something, because like in today's day and age, nobody wants to read anymore. You know what I mean? Like everyone's like, if it's not a video, like I don't give a fuck. You know what I mean? So like figuring out how to walk that line and like tell you stories or tell you like good, deep information in a way that's entertaining and like that you want to consume is like something that the entire media industry is going through. But like I just have the luxury of dealing with like a really fun business area. You know what I mean? Like, so instead of having to try and convince people like how to make them want to read, you know, business news or whatever, like really I'm just trying to convince people to want to read like, you know, about this cool pot brand or like this, you know, this new strain that like they should check out because like whatever they're hearing in the marketplace. Like a lot of people hype up their new strains, you know what I mean? But like most of the shit that comes out is trash. You know what I mean? So like being able to see through and like actually say like, okay, this is quality. You should, you know, you should try this is like, again, something I take very seriously and something that like, I mean, maybe it's just spoiling my own ego, but like I'm very much enjoying.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, I'm happy too that there's somebody that actually cares about the quality of the cannabis that's being put out, because that's something I want to actually touch. It's a very interesting time that we live in. It's expensive, like we were talking about earlier. The THC content is a lie sometimes. It's just a lot going on. The packaging is bullshit. It's just a lot of different things that are going into it, and it's just I just don't like it. I really don't.
So here's the thing. The cannabis industry is going through like a identity crisis, right? Like no one who's a lifer got into the industry to pay taxes or wear a suit or like go deal with their local politicians. You know what I mean?
Right.
We got in because we were outlaws. We got in because we loved the plant. We got in because whatever reason. You know what I mean? Like I started selling weed because I couldn't afford the amount of weed I wanted to smoke. You know what I mean? Like that's like one of those things that like when we talk about things I look for when talking to brands, like there's usually some iteration of that. You know what I mean? Like I started growing because like I couldn't afford to smoke the weed that I wanted to, so I started growing it as good as I can.
Makes sense
to
me.
That like so that kind of like idea in the modern era where everything's trying to go pop, and like we know that like people besides, I know that what I look like when I say this, but like there are other people who smoke besides Shaggy from Scooby-Doo looking motherfuckers. You know what I mean? And like I know that like we've been like stereotyped like that, and like Cheech and Chong, like, you know, like some of us very much wear it.
Yeah.
But like cannabis is like alcohol in that like many people are going to consume it. Yeah. And they don't necessarily need to make a show about it. You know what I mean? So figuring out how we bridge that gap is one of our biggest challenges. And I think it's the challenge of the whole industry, because like we need to speak to the general consumers if we want to become the big businesses of this industry. Right. You know what I mean? But the other side of the coin is the people that are going just to be the big business, like the MSOs, the like the MedMens of the world, and like not to talk shit on any specific one, but they don't have a soul. And I don't mean that in like they're just corporate entities that are created for profit, not because they want to proliferate this plant. So like if you talk about like who's going to grow the best quality stuff, it's always going to be the person who's in the garden singing to their plants. You know what I mean?
Definitely playing classical music, looking at the hertz, everything.
Exactly.
Really caring for it.
Exactly. And you know, when you have 100 acres, you just can't play music, or they don't get the same level of vibrations. You know what I mean? So it's like it's an interesting time because, okay, as we talk about going pop, everyone talks about this phantom wine mom, right? Like this new woman who's going to, like the soccer mom who's going to come into the industry, and all of a sudden she's going to put down wine, she's going to start smoking a ton of weed, and we all got to cater to her. But like, she's not coming in and spending every paycheck she's got on weed, right?
No.
Like, I don't give a fuck what she wants. I want to cater to the guys who are living this. And then everything else will shake out because, like, again, like, think about, like, what happened with Runts, right? Like, it wasn't necessarily that, like, they had the best marketing plan. It was that it was in demand. People wanted it, and that folklore spread, right? Like, no one is asking for, like, these factory processed joints. No one goes and tells their friends about it. You know what I mean? Like, what they go and tell their friends about is the flower that excites them. You know what I mean? So, like, the same way the industry has to figure out how to communicate that excitement to the end user, and we haven't really found a good way to do that yet. The big business side has to figure out how to work the love into their side of the business. And until one side figures out how to do it, both sides are just going to continuously be fucked.
Exactly. And one thing, too, I want to kind of go back to what you were saying is finding, like, looking at the general
I'm sorry,
public.
I'm super stoned, so I'm going all over the
no,
place.
bro, you're good. I'm following everything you're saying. One thing that you brought up is, finding the general public and not realizing it's just not people who like Shaggy, Scooby-Doo. I actually found you on Clubhouse, random, back in the day in 2020, y'all, when everyone was just in the crib. I was on Clubhouse, and I was actually specifically looking for, like, black cannabis entrepreneurs or just something particular in that because, I looked, there's only like a 2% ownership within it. So I just, I don't really see many people who look like me doing different types of interviews or podcasts along these type of lines. So when I found you and just heard the different things you were talking about, I'm like, okay, there's actually somebody who actually wants to push the culture into a different way and actually realizes the whole world actually consumes this plant. We all love this plant, but it needs to be presented differently now.
I think the thing that I try and remember, and, like, when I have arguments with a lot of, like, the heady boys, as I like to call them, in the industry and, like the growers and stuff like that, like, a lot of the things that we argue or nitpick about is, like, so inside baseball that the general consumer, like, it's so over their head they don't even know what the fuck we're talking about, right? So, like, trying to keep in mind that, like, what the layman understands and, like, what we actually need to communicate is not always, like, they don't always align, right? Mm-hmm. So figuring out, like, I think figuring out how to translate complex issues into, like, digestible bits is, like, what makes a good writer in general, right? Like, the more complex of a situation you could dumb down into, like, a very simple sentence, like, that to me is, like, we see Picasso and all these fucking artists who can paint beautiful things. Like, when you can distill something really complex into, like, a few words, that to me is, like, the most magic type of art, right? So figuring out, like I was saying before, like, how to communicate that excitement, right? But, like, also, like, so much of this shit is exactly the same. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, like, trying to stand out in this industry, in this space, is a very hard and also important part of this battle. So that's why, like, when we look at brands like Monogram, Jay-Z's brand,
yeah, for sure.
Like, there's a whole side of that story that hasn't been told about DeAndre Watson, who actually owned Monogram, who Jay-Z acquired. And, like, if the story was, look at Jay-Z empowering this black businessman to take advantage of this $50 billion industry in front of him, like, no one's going to throw a stick at that story, right? But because it's Jay-Z buys a weed brand and gets in the weed industry, everyone's like, oh, Jay-Z has a weed brand. Well, he doesn't grow weed. What does he care? Like this, that, and the other thing. But, like, Jay-Z also owns Ace of Spades. I don't know if you've drank it, but, like, I'm sure there's better champagne out there. You know what I mean? Sure. But, like, the people who are buying it in the clubs, they're buying it because it's a gold bottle and it comes out with the girls with the sparklers and all that shit. It's a status symbol.
And it's Jay-Z.
It's a status symbol, but it's a niche, right?
Right.
It's a segment of the market. He's not fucking up Cristal's business. He's not fucking. I mean, maybe actually he did fuck up Cristal's business. Yeah. So, like, he's not fucking up he's not fucking up, like, Corbell's business. You know what I mean? By, like, existing there. So, like, that's the thing that I think that, like, our industry hasn't really understood yet. Is there's going to be so many of these niches that, like, it's not like there's going to be one winner that's everything. Like cookies is not going to be the monopoly that just takes over the industry, right? Like they're going to be a great store. They're going to have all their merch and stuff like that. But like there's always going to be others that exist because like there are people who just don't want to shop there. There are people who can't shop there, can't afford it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So like there's always going to be all these other segments. And like if you look at the data, the highest selling brands in the legal cannabis space are those like scale brands where it's like get an ounce for $100. Because like if you remember, like when you were a kid, when you were broke, like when you didn't have any disposable income, you just got the most weed that you could for however much, for as cheap as you could. You know what I mean? If I could, and this was, I didn't live in California at this time, but when I was 18, I can get an ounce for fucking $100. I would have done that shit all goddamn day, no matter how bad it was.
Sir.
I'd be smoking big ass blunts all the time, and I had the time of my fucking life. You know what I mean? Who cares if it wasn't that good? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I got a whole 28 grams, bro.
Exactly. So there's segments to this shit that like, again, when we talk about the industry, we like to think that like, oh, it's this one thing. And that's actually something that like I think cannabis does to everybody. And like I've seen this happen in like the wrong ways, like when like people like social mobs come at people and shit like that. Like what actually happens is like cannabis makes you more comfortable with yourself. So like once you get high, you think that like, and not everyone, but like some people, once they get high, they think the weird things that are going on in their head are going on in everybody's head. So they feel empowered to talk about that like weird, sometimes fucked up shit. You know what I mean?
Sure, yeah.
So like there's definitely downsides to this. But the good side of it is like it does allow people to like be more honest about who they are and who they want to be and shit like that, right? So like
you could be way more introspective. For a person that may not be, it will probably open them up to be a little bit more.
Exactly. Yeah. So like maybe if you feel like you're going to be introspective, you know what I mean? You're probably not going to smoke the same brand at that time as when you want to get faded as fuck. You know what I mean? So that's basically what I'm trying to say is there's going to be all of these segments and moods and feelings for this. The same way there's 15 million beer brands, there's going to be a ton of weed brands
Most
as
definitely.
Things shake out. It's just a matter
it's happening right now.
Exactly, 100%.
Yeah.
But also, we're seeing all of these major brands and all this big money come in and lose hundreds of millions of dollars realizing like, oh, you can't just push boof on the market and they're not just going to smoke anything. You know what I mean?
People smoke boof every day now.
People do,
and
but
comfortably smoke boof.
People do, but and again, so like I said before about like the top selling brands, the thing that people don't account for is like it's easy to make a sale. It's hard to maintain a consumer. So you might buy that $100 ounce once, but after you smoke that weed and you realize it's not that good, you're going to go look for another $100 ounce. You know what I mean? From like a different brand.
Yeah.
So like that's the kind of thing that I think that like will eventually level out is the fact that like there's going to be real value in these brands, right? And it's either like, okay, here's the best weed you can get for really cheap, or like these really high-end brands that exist because people really like this terp profile, like OGs, right? Like certain brands in LA have made their entire portfolio around growing really good OGs because that's a flavor that a certain connoisseur wants. And like they're not fucking with Cookie's business. You know what I mean? They're not fucking with, the Cure company. You know what I mean? Like they can all exist because some people want fruity flavors and some people want fucking gas.
It's that easy.
It's not that easy because obviously like producing them and pumping them out is like, whatever. But like, I think people are too focused on trying to win the whole game as opposed to like remembering that like I heard something like, it was probably 10 years ago. The quickest way to be $1 million business is to get 30,000 people to pay you $33 or 33,000 people to pay you $33. And so like if you can do that on like a monthly basis, you could be a $12 million business by the end of the year just by, those subscriptions. And that's like 33,000 is a much more attainable number than $1 million. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
But like getting a $1 from 1 million people also might not be that big of a challenge. You know what I mean? If you went about it in the right way. So like figuring out how to like break down these things and like what's the quickest path to sustainable. Like I think a lot of people like are trying to win. They're not trying to like be sustained. You know what I mean? And like being sustainable is a much more attainable goal than winning the game.
Right. And like you were saying, you're going to find another $100 ounce and not go back to that brand. But also, too, if you do find a good one, you'll tell your friend. Your friend will tell that person, and then at that point,
well, that's what I mean about the value, right? Like, so there's this brand, Union Electric.
Okay.
They sell like $25 eighths. Okay, so it's not like quite that cheap, but like you get a half ounce for, or they probably actually sell close to an ounce for $100. Maybe it's 120.
Okay.
It's outdoor weed, but it's good outdoor weed.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
So that, if I was gonna smoke, if I needed some, to get super cheap bulk, I would go buy a bunch of that shit.
Mm-hmm.
They're gonna be around because they're providing value. They're not just trying to fit a category. That's what I mean when I was saying about the MSOs before, the guys who are just coming into the industry who are just trying to make money. Like, they're all like, oh, we're just going to make a pre-roll brand. We're just going to make a vape brand. We're just going to make whatever. Like, do you actually smoke vapes? Do you actually smoke pre-rolls? Because, like, those categories suck. You know what I mean? Like, you got to go above and beyond to win that category and, like, or be like e-cig money like fucking Steezy. And, like, I don't think anybody's going to really beat Steezy at a game that they know. You know what I mean?
Right.
Now, no judgment, like they have their segment and people want to buy that, and that's what it is. But then, like, there's also like the hash rosin pens. You know what I mean? Like, there are people who are making like really high end. People are spending a ton of money on carts.
Yeah.
I'm not that. I don't fit into that category,
Not
but
that
like
guy.
I know plenty of people who are making tons of money off those people. So like they're out there.
Mm-hmm. Like there's something for everybody.
Exactly.
Ultimately.
We just think that like whatever our preference is like the rest of the world's.
Yeah. Real quick, I want to now present this new commercial from El Toro Verde. It just recently won second place in the Emerald Cup. So real quick, I just want to present this commercial one time. You guys are now tuned in to Bong Talk. We will be back real quick.
Crafted from the fires of dragons, chilled on the highest peaks of Everest, the Canagard is designed for perfection, using only the freshest herbs our planet has to offer, cultivated by years of experience. El Toro Verde, crisp, rich draw, slow resin burn. Be bold, be elegant, be the bull. El Toro Verde, you should be smoking.
So you are now tuned into the Bong Talk Sit Down series, and I am your host, Nappy 2000. I got my man Jon in the building, the VP of content of High Times Magazine, if you didn't know. So we were having a conversation right now, or just, cannabis and just companies and different stuff like that. What is your current outlook, of just what the cannabis industry is doing right now in 2022 as of May?
I think that everyone's just trying to survive right now. Right. I think that we're all being taxed out the ass. And the reason why you see everyone going so hard on the merch game is because they need that revenue, the less taxed, the higher margin revenue, in order to meet their business needs on the cannabis side, right? So I think hopefully we get some legislation that changes the tax structure, and then the game will kind of loosen up a little bit. But I mean, like, there are a lot of people who are getting priced out right now, man, and the thing that I try and remind people, especially like the farmers and like people on the Hill, is that like we're in a race to the bottom right now, right? So the expertise is like has very low value. But eventually this big money, the MSOs I was talking about, like they are going to realize when they figure out they can't sell boof over and over again to these people, then they're going to need this expertise, and that value is going to skyrocket. So the equation is going to change, and some of these people who have been, family farms for a long time, like the structure might work out like what's happened with like some of these like guilds where like like it's farmers like pooling resources, but like what's more than likely going to happen is like people are not going to be the CEOs they think they are. They're going to be like a cog in a bigger machine. And again, I was talking about before about sustainability, right? And like figuring out like you don't need a Maserati, or that's even, I don't even know how much a Maserati costs, but like a fucking Phantom or something like that, you know what I mean, to be successful. Like if you are feeding your family, if you are paying all of your bills, whatever, on your hustle, that's successful. You know what I mean? So I think once, like, you know, kind of expectations realign, because there's been a long time of people being like, oh, this is like a $50 billion opportunity. There's cash pouring out of the walls. Everyone's making so much money. And like, yeah, I know some trappers that are still making good money.
Most definitely.
But like, not many on the rec market, you know?
Yeah.
So I hope for everyone's sake that, you know, things start shifting in the opposite direction. But if not, like, long live the trap. I support that.
Yeah, I mean, it almost, the trap is back at this point. I mean, it never left.
The economics of the way that some of this stuff works, especially like the high-end Cali bags, like the prices that they're selling for, like I've never heard of. You know what I mean? So like, but at the same time, like you go up to Oregon, you can buy like top shelf ins for like $500 a pound. You know what I mean? So once federal legalization happens and interstate commerce opens up, shit's gonna change greatly. I actually think Oregon is like the biggest sleeper opportunity in the country, because they're gonna have like basically Humboldt grade at like a fucking super discount, because you know their shit's so much cheaper there. Energy, land, but you know at the same time, like it's like California wine. Like our stuff is always gonna maintain a premium, right?
Definitely.
So it's going to be interesting to see what it looks like when New York can actually legally buy California grade. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Aren't you from New York?
Yeah. So
okay.
So we for 420 this year, we did a session in Washington Square Park with like a bunch of California brands, a bunch of New York brands, and it was wild. Like New York is alive right now, bro. Like there's, first of all, I stayed on the Lower East Side.
Right.
There's like 3 to 4 dispensaries / lounges on every goddamn block, bro. Okay, so they got like, they all have like stores that like, it's kind of like this, where like you're in like a head shop type thing, and then there's like a door in the back that like will take you. And actually, I was in like my 4th or 5th one of like going into the basement with some random guy that I had just met on a street, where I was like, maybe this isn't the best situation that I'm going into right now. But like, yeah, man, like again, everyone's just so hungry for it. And they're also very aware what happened in California, where like after 64 went online, like a lot of the money dried up. So like, because they know it's the grace period, everyone's basically like trying to get in where they can. And like, I'm telling you, bro, like full like market, like a full sesh marketplace in Washington Square Park. Cops didn't give a fuck. Like I don't know if you've ever been to Washington Square Park, but like it is a big ass park, bro, and like you literally could not fit any more people in there. Like 10 years ago, they would have fucking arrested everybody, no problem, thrown us all in fucking jail, whatever. This was like, there were cops that were there, and then when people like started coming in, they all just like walked to the entrance of like the park and like looked the other way. It was like, like I totally support that type of policing. You know what I mean? Where it's just like, yeah, we're here, but like, you know, like don't shoot anybody. You know what I mean? Other than that, like we're gonna fucking. I also heard that like in New York, they're still dealing with like slowdowns from like all the like abolish the police stuff, which like again, I support that. You know what I mean? If you're not gonna fuck with anyone and like you're really only there if like your boss makes you do anything, like I relate to that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, it's just a trip to see just where everything is, because they lied to people with this transition from Prop 215 to Prop 64.
But listen,
it's a tragic thing to what happened in that transition.
So the tragic part is that they forgot about the patients, but human greed knows no bounds, bro. Like thinking that like we're gonna involve any type of government in this shit and like they're not gonna tax us out the ass is fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, not put their hand in something.
We know they're gonna step on it to shit,
definitely.
right? But like the trade off is supposed to be like we're not supposed to get locked up for it anymore. We're not supposed to we're let out all the fucking people that you have locked up for it. And so like that's I think the part of the conversation that like really gets left out is that like even when we're talking about like equity brands and stuff like that, like there are people who are in states today who are serving time for something that like suits in boardrooms are making like supposedly making on paper tens of millions of dollars for.
Right.
And like the fact that we haven't figured out how to like retroactively, and like I understand there are certain situations where like there was violence involved or something like that, or, like they caught him with weed and then they found a gun or something like that like it's not all cut and dry.
Yeah,
but
sometimes it's just a gram.
But well, that's my thing.
Yeah,
like it should be like possession charges, like across the country. If we're talking about this on a federal level, like why is it even a question that we're like gonna like I don't remember what the term is, but grant clemency or just revoke all of those charges, So but that's the thing that no one remembers about legalization is there's like so much minutia that like these laws come up against. And so like here's one for New York, right? Like everyone's doing these trap lounges, but technically if you have a liquor license, you can't have smoking in your building. And you can't have smoking in your building because of the Clean Air Act. That doesn't say no smoking cigarettes. That says no smoking in your building, right? We want to have clean air for everybody.
Right.
So if you have smoking in your building in a place that have a liquor license, they could revoke your liquor license immediately. So like, how the fuck do we deal with that? Everyone's making most of their money off booze right now. Even if they bring a weed bar in, that's not going to supplement the alcohol sales. It's a big part of the reason Vegas hasn't adopted this yet. You know what I mean?
Does LA even have any
consumption?
Yeah, no, like the lounges. Is there maybe like one or two?
There's a few. The Lowell one had opened up about a year ago, which I don't know when this is going to release, but whatever, fuck it. High Times bought it, so we are going to be reopening that in a few months. Very excited about that. But I was just tonight at the opening at the Artistry in West Hollywood. They call it the Studio Lounge or something like that. Like they're definitely starting to be more. There have been in San Francisco for a while.
Okay.
But again, like we don't. There's something about like the Clean Air Act in New York City that like specifically it like makes it difficult. Here we had humidor lounges and stuff like that, which in the Bay, that's what they rolled over first. They were like, basically, if you have a humidor lounge, and not necessarily that it was like fully legal, but like gray area enough that like if you have a humidor license and you decide to turn into a dab bar, like we won't fuck with you because we don't really have a path forward now. Like if you figure it out, holler at us and maybe we'll adopt that.
Okay,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's what I think the feds are waiting for too. Like I think they're waiting for like California or Oklahoma or New York to figure it out and figure out like this is a structure that works. This is how the business is going to be sustainable. This is how we take care of the equity like brands. And once someone figures out like, okay, this is a plan that works, then the feds will just be like, okay, we can take that and adopt it on a national scale.
Right.
Because like it's already the 5th highest grossing crop in our country right now. So states like Oklahoma, who had like all this farmland and like, couldn't fucking grow shit that like was worth any money, now all of a sudden can start growing hemp and they have cash crops again. You know what I mean? So like the fact that like Texas and like a lot of these like agricultural states wouldn't adopt this is purely because they want to use it for, fucked up reasons. So if that's the case, the Fed should take that fucking cruelty away from them. Yeah. But they also just are allowing fucking Roe vs. Wade to be repealed, so who the fuck knows? We're all kind of going to hell in a handbasket.
They have no problem growing cotton and tobacco over there, though. They do that shit constantly.
So that's another thing that I think is interesting, especially given how tobacco. And I mean, I guess it's just like there's just been a tobacco hate train for the last however many years, and I get it because of cancer and all that shit. But
those commercials are getting crazy.
Well, but so like in other countries, actually, if you buy like a pack of cigarettes, they have warnings on the packs that are like this causes cancer, and like some states, some countries have like actual pictures of like terrible fucked up shit. So like we are more modest in that point. But actually the reason why I was going to bring up cigarettes before is because of that tax structure. That tax structure is absolutely insane too. The pack of cigarettes actually doubles because of all of the sin tax that the government charged on it. And you don't see it at the end. So like we were talking about before about how going into a dispensary is like such a shitty experience now, right? It's
not fun.
But like the worst part about it is when like you think you're spending $70 on an eighth and then you fucking get up to the register and they're like, okay, give me $103. And you're like, what the fuck do you mean? I thought it was $70. Yeah, well then $30 tax on top of it. Like, wait, what? Like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
So, again,
the California tax, the 64 tax. I'm like, damn.
But the sin tax with cigarettes, like that all happens before we get to it, right? So they just say like it's $12 or whatever, and like you got to pay some basic tax on top of it, but they just hit you with that $12, and that's what you pay. You know what I mean? Right. So like, I think that's the model that they're going to eventually have to figure out, and once we get there, hopefully, that becomes something where it's like, all right, we can adopt this on a national scale. And once we adopt it on a national scale, then we have to address all the people in prison because there's nowhere left for like federal prison. That's really where we're getting fucked is federal prisons, right? Like if you're in, and actually here's a fun one. So high times has always been considered contraband in prisons.
Really?
Yes, they didn't want anyone to have access to drug material or whatever. So we recently appealed it, and the state of California has now ruled that high times is no longer considered contraband, and California state prisoners can have it.
Right.
And so this has like always been a thing because we have across the country, there's all these prisoners who request it, who like go on the website, and I don't know how, but like go on the website and ask for it, or if someone does
they
for
got
them.
phones for sure.
So every month we get issues sent back to us that's like from the prison that's like, sorry, someone asked for this, they can't have it, so like we sent it back to you. So now we don't get that from the California people anymore unless they're in one of the federal penitentiaries out here.
Right.
So like there's still one, I don't remember where the fuck it is, but like every once in a while we'll get one from there, and like we're sending them notes now, like, yo, fucking Newsom said it was okay, like come on, let them have it.
The fact that they consider the magazine contraband is hilarious.
But I mean, think about everything's contraband in prison. You know what I mean? But like that's again, it was one of those things that we're literally like it's information. Like let them read. Like you're gonna tell us that you won't let prisoners read. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like that's like no one's gonna say no to that argument.
Yeah,
you know
most
what I mean?
definitely.
But they did for a while.
Yeah. What are your thoughts like on Cannabis Awards and different things like that?
What are my thoughts? So the Cannabis Cup, which High Times does, is like the first one, right? And I think that like the initial idea of it is super awesome. It was a battle of the buds, so like it was non-branded or whatever. But I think the compliance has basically destroyed most of the competition systems because it's all got to be branded now. Because it has to have the THC percentage on it and all that shit. We can't just put a weed in a Ziploc bag and fucking give it to people anymore.
Right.
So on one hand, it's a much different experience, but on the other hand, now we can make it a retail model, and people at home can do it. So right now we have something called the People's Choice Cannabis Cup, which like it's actually SoCal is happening right now. And you can go to High Times Dispensary. So that's another thing I don't know if I mentioned. We have dispensaries now.
Where they at?
All over the state. It's only delivery in LA and the Bay. We have 2 in Oakland. We have 1 in Coalinga. We have 1 in Blythe. We have 1 in Redding. 1 in Shasta Lake. 1 in San Bernardino.
San
Bernardino.
Really?
I will send you the address. I don't know what it is
please.
off the top of my head, but
I
I
did
definitely
not know
will.
that. That's interesting.
Yeah, basically we're selling them out of there now, and
Okay.
so people who've like grew up reading about this can now actually participate in the competition. So again, it's a little bit different because everything is labeled, you know exactly who it is, but the value prop for the brands is now, instead of like back in the day, if you like, let's say, really loved entry number 13, if it didn't win a cup, you might never find out what entry 13 was. You know what I mean? So now anything that you like in a kit, you can actually be like, oh, I really like the fucking El Toro Verde. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm going to go buy more El Toro Verdes. You know what I mean? So it's, again, different model, but it's always fun. Like I really like I love being judgy just in general. You know what I mean? So I'm like, oh, let me stack this weed against another, and like I really do every time I judge, no matter how big or small the competition is. Like it becomes like a death bracket in my house. Like I put each bud like one next to another. Okay, this one's better than this one, so fuck this guy. You know what I mean? Now this one's better than this one, so fuck this one. You know what I mean? And just kind of like until I get to like the highest point.
Yeah.
And then
I see your stories, bro. You be having a whole.
I do get a bunch
a lot
of weed.
of shit, bro.
I do get a bunch of weed because of the job,
Yeah.
and so I do the Coplist every month too, which is like since I started doing that, I definitely started getting a lot more because now it's become this thing, which I think is hilarious. Because okay, so did you ever watch Aqua Teen Hunger Force back in the day?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so you know Carl?
Yeah.
Okay, so back in the day, and this is like, I literally made this whole stupid joke about this fucking bump that they did for the NFL back in the day. They used to do a thing called Carl's Stone Cold Lock of the Century of the Week. And it was basically him making a pick for Football Sunday for the NFL. Like, it was a promo that the Aqua Teen did for the NFL, and it was like the best cross-brand ever because you'd never expect it. And he was like always just like rooting for the Giants or something like that. It was fucking hilarious. But so I was like, okay, let me make like a list of like cool shit because like everyone's sending me all this stuff. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna call it the Cop List of the Century. And then like I was like, no one's gonna get that or whatever. So let's make it like John Stone Cold Cop List. Oh, Stone Cold Cop List of the century is what I was originally going to call it. I was like, okay, fuck it. I was called Stone Cold Coplist. And then once I started doing it, which again, like, was literally like, I wasn't expecting anyone to even care. Like, I was kind of like putting it up because like I could, you know?
Yeah.
Then it started becoming one of those things where like people are like hitting me up like, yo, what do I got to do to get in it? And like, the best part about it is like there's literally nothing you can do. You know what I mean? Like I got to see the weed, so like you can give me some weed, and like if I like it, whatever.
Smell that shit.
But yeah,
you know
yeah.
I mean?
Like I have to love it because like if I don't, then like I got to answer to kids who like went and bought it and don't love it. You know what I mean? So it's like it's become this game where like now every time I go out, people come up to me and they're like, "Yo, like." I tried this. Like, thank you so much for telling me about it. And like, I didn't even know I told you about it, bro. But like, I'm fucking glad you like it. Like, those guys are dope. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So now at today's point, like, I am definitely seeing much more weed than like I even knew existed. But like I said earlier, like it does, the good part about it is like I can see like the trends of the industry really easy now. And like as I mentioned before, like a lot of people are doing like exactly the same thing and just like calling it different things. So like I'd always laugh back in the day when like people were like, oh, like this is like a gelato 33 or whatever, and like now like it doesn't matter what you label it as, like I'll know if that's LCG. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's just it's become a fun game.
And one thing too I want to talk about, I think you were talking about in one of your interviews, I didn't even personally know this, but NFTs in cannabis, like what is the future of that going into cannabis? Because that's kind of interesting how that's being introduced into that type of world.
So pretty much every time I talk about NFTs, the first thing I say is that they're all scams. And I fundamentally believe that. I think that like a lot of these guys there are a lot of artists who are trying to sell their art who are using it legitimately, right? But then there are a lot of people who are just trying to do pump and dumps. And it's the same thing we saw 5 years ago or whenever it was with the ICOs, and like all that it is basically like securities fraud for a lot of these guys, right? And securities law has no statute of limitations, and I'm really scared of the SEC. So I really ain't trying to fuck with that shit. But I am very interested in the technology, right? So like, while I would say like don't spend your money on JPEGs, I do believe that like blockchain technology and like the ledger system is like eventually going to be built into Shopify, and it's how all transactions on the internet are going to happen.
For cars, food, for everything.
For everything. But like think about it like this, like if it allows you to build a royalty structure into things. So anything with downstream monetization potential, like Nike will sell Jordans this way because they want a piece of you taking that $150 Jordan and selling it for $500. This is the vehicle for them to do that. But that's going to be a real world item, not some fucking JPEG, right? So like what I try and remind people is that like how old are you?
I'm 27.
27? Okay, so you remember Betamax?
I don't remember Betamax.
Okay, so like you don't have to. I don't remember it like physically using it, but I know what Betamax is from like my parents and shit like that. But like it was like a first iteration of like a new technology that people like went crazy over, and like then it was phased out really quickly because CDs came out, right? So like that's like what I think is happening here. Is like this is V1 of a technology. Or here's a better example: it's an iPod. Like everyone's going crazy, like, oh my god, like we got to get these iPods because like we got to play all this fucking music, and then like eventually an iPhone's gonna come out, and you don't need the iPod anymore because your phone does all that shit. Like that's where we are right now. So like. Not that there's not money to be made. I know plenty of people who've made tons of money fucking flipping it. And if you want to pay attention and day trade, essentially, like it's a gold mine. But like there's also like all that money is being made on the backs of someone who doesn't know better. And like that's just not kosher. You know what I mean? Right. I'm just not sure.
Yeah.
Not only would I not feel good about it, but also, as I said, like it's fucking like if you are creating an NFT project, right, and it has a roadmap, like what you're doing is creating a business, and you're getting people to invest in a business. So like you're an unregistered security. So like if in 5 years someone says, okay, this guy fucked me, like they can still prosecute you. If in 50 years somebody says this guy fucked me, they can still prosecute you as long as they can prove ongoing harm.
No
right?
statute of limitation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So. You can go and become a gazillionaire off all this shit, and then once the SEC and the IRS and all these the government figures out how to fucking prosecute this shit, they can come and claw all that shit back. They can claw back more than you even have at that moment. Like, I ain't trying to get caught with my pants down like that. Like, the same reason I pay my taxes is because, like, eventually there's going to be an AI that just goes through. And, like, right now, I don't make enough where, like, they are going to give a shit about, like, the small pot of money that I could potentially withhold from them. But because it's just not worth prosecuting. The manpower going into trying to claw back that money, like, wouldn't pay for one person, let alone the team of people they need to do. Whatever. Eventually, there's going to be an AI that can just go through all the spreadsheets and balance the fucking book and send you a tab. The reason why I pay my taxes is because when that day comes, I don't want to owe the house. You know what I mean? Like, or I owe the house a little bit, but not like, you know, fucking more money than I've got.
It's going to be
you know
very
what I mean?
precise of every.
Oh yeah, that's what I mean. This shit's gonna be a
Yeah.
robot that fucking goes through your credit cards and fucking and knows
no more
everything.
notices.
You know?
It's just directly to you.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
like, again, I'm like, so that's also what I'm worried about. Like the guys trapping right now. Like we're past the time where like they're going to throw a lot of these guys in jail, especially in legal states.
Right.
But what's going to happen is the IRS is going to show up and they're going to be like, yo, we think you've been moving 30 pounds a week at fucking $5,000 a pound. So you owe us 40% of that fucking times 12 months that you haven't paid for this. So here's a bill for this.
Because I saw that they're now going into like the PayPals, the Cash
Well,
Apps.
yeah, bro. Fucking
Zelles.
Biden made it so anything over
Yeah.
$500, like fuck that shit. I mean,
Yeah,
listen,
all that.
I will say though, like, you think trappers aren't gonna like send a bunch of $450 payments? Like, that's like that's a slope that like I don't know really made sense. Like, it would have made sense if they didn't tell us about it. You know what I mean? If they were like, oh, okay, like, you know, like just started doing it retroactively or whatever. But like now that they're like, yo, anything over $500, like I don't know about you, but like I haven't sent anything over $500 in Venmo since. You know?
When there's a will, there's a way.
Exactly, exactly. I might send fucking 200 in Venmo, fucking 150 in Cash App, and then another fucking $300 in fucking in Venmo or in fucking PayPal. You know, just so that they can't fucking track it as easily.
Man, just give it to you all in cash.
I mean, you know, I will say since COVID, like I know that like I should have cash, but like I don't know. I just feel like everything, like, all my shit's digital, or it's either fucking in cryptocurrency or fucking the regular stock market. Like I can't have. If I have cash, I spend it on stupid shit like drugs. It's basically, I spend all my money on art or put it into the market because at least once it's in the market, like I won't take it out. You know what I mean? I feel like that's like for retirement or something, but like, you know, it probably won't last till then.
You don't see it, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's doing it for you.
It's like I already spent it, you know?
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
eventually, hopefully one day it's going to be like, hey, by the way, this is all the money that we made while you thought this was nothing. You know?
Right.
But maybe not. We'll see.
Man. So, dude, one thing I do want to ask you, man, this is you work for High Times Magazine. It's been around for almost 50 years now. How does it feel to now be a part of this legacy of, you know, giving out information to people, but now in this new world in a different way that we have, because there's now social media, we can now do things a little bit more directly to the consumer. So
High Times was founded by a guy who famously, in a court hearing that was like an anti-pornography court hearing, went up and pied, like with a fucking whipped cream pie, the judge because he thought he was being ridiculous. So like we were founded by real rebels, right? And like smoking weed is getting less and less rebellious. You know what I mean? So like what I was talking before about the identity crisis of the industry, like you ask about holding how I feel about having this legacy and like or being a part of this legacy, and like it's something that I really like think about every day. And like now actually like I'm personally like not just personally invested in, but like I like if people talk shit about the brand now, I take it much more personally than I really should. Which like again, like most of the shit, like as I said, there are plenty of people who have histories with High Times or whatever, and like the first few years when I was at the brand, like people came to me with like problems that like had nothing to do with me, that were from long before I got there. So like, you know, I recognize that like most of those feelings are not because of me, but like still I like can't help but like it's like someone like protecting their baby. You know what I mean?
The baggage has now came onto you.
Exactly, exactly. So like I have a really high or reverence for the culture in general, right? So being able to be a steward of the culture first and foremost is something that I have a great deal of respect for. But then to do that at an institution as iconic as this is like still something that I pinch myself about, because like, you know, again, like a lot of the people playing this game have had a lot more to lose than I have for a very long time, right? So for me, I wouldn't have felt good about participating in the industry unless I did something to help proliferate it first, to earn my stripes. You know what I mean? And like that, I think, is like the most powerful thing for me, is that like I really do feel like I'm earning my stripes, and like I'm earning my place here by helping restore this thing that, like, you know, anybody who had any feelings about or whatever, like when you are hurt by something, it's because you care about something. You know what I mean? So helping use this brand to like make people feel seen and like, you know, like spread their good words to, you know, the world is like, you know, it's an honor, you know?
Yeah, like you're saying, not to stroke your own ego, but yeah, you have that now. You have the power to find different individuals who actually deserve the different things, that actually have a good brand, that actually keep the integrity, the actual love of the plant, because they're not just wearing a suit. It's actually people in the fields, the people who actually play the music for the plant, the people who talk to the plant, everything.
So it's like, I don't like to think like you can, in this position, you could be one of two things, right? You could be a gatekeeper and like push people out, or you could be the door opener, right? And like that's what I try and be, the door opener. But like, again, it's, you got to open the door for the right people, because if you just let everyone through the door, shit gets watered down, it gets muddy, no one gives a fuck anymore, right? Like you gotta like, that's like curating a party, right? Like you want the right people to be there so that everyone else wants to be there.
Exactly.
But like, again, and like the thing about the identity crisis we're all in is, how do we take this thing that we love and make the party a little bit more approachable for everyone, so that everyone can love this thing that we do? You know what I mean? Because like that doesn't take anything away from us, it only builds us up.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly, because we're all in this together, most definitely.
100%.
So what can we expect for the rest of this year from High Times Magazine? Because you told me about these clinics that I never heard of. You're talking about the delivery services.
So we got more.
What's going on?
We got more shops opening up. I'm not 100% sure where they are, if I could talk about them. I did mention that the lounge that'll be opening in WeHo.
Okay.
Soon. We're launching Weirdos Tomorrow, which is our basically contributor rants and raves section. It's a place for us to kind of wax about the things that we care about without necessarily writing a research paper on it. So, for example, my first rant, which is going to drop tomorrow morning, which I'm sure will be days ago by the time this comes out. But it's about THC percentage being bullshit, and how like you really shouldn't like shop off a number. You should shop with your nose. And so there's that. We have a magazine that comes out every month. We work very hard on it. I think it's looking better than ever, so I would love for you to check it out.
No, yeah, most definitely.
And actually, our art issue is the September issue that comes out, and that's like my baby.
Okay.
So we have a really... Last year we did Talking Terps and Money Trees on the cover, and this year we have Nichos and Cess, two super historic graffiti artists doing... plant-themed things unlike anything that either of them have ever done before.
Right.
So it's really... So, again, like, we talk about, like, working with this, you know, this iconic brand. One of the coolest things that this has afforded me is, like, the opportunity to work with, like, icons and people I've, like, respected and loved forever.
Because everyone smokes weed.
Everyone smokes weed, but also, like, being able to, like, connect with them and then do something that neither of us have done before in a new way, right? So, like, you know, like the Nichos, he does anatomicals. So, like, for example, like, we got this bull right here. Like, he would draw the bull, but then also, like, its circulatory system and its musculatory system and, like, all that, like, coming out of it. He's got murals all over around here. For us, he's going to be doing a plant that's taken apart, right? So, like, you're going to have the leaf, but then you're going to see all of the little things that are going on inside of it as well. And the back cover is this guy, Cess, who Cess comes from Sensimilia. So his name literally means weed. But he has this amazing ability to like hide. He makes graffiti pictures or graffiti art, but he hides his name in like portraits. So like he'll draw someone like rolling up a blunt, and like the way the weed is sprinkled out says "cess" in the weed, right? So he's doing that for our cover with High Times hidden in it. Like it's going to be a really, really fucking amazing issue.
Was there previously art editions in it, or is this new?
So this is something that I started. 3 years ago is technically the first one we were supposed to do, or we did. That one didn't exactly go according to plan because just we had some issues. But the last two, I feel like, are actual iteration or actual our first two editions of this, and it's something that like a couple months ago we introduced the 2 cover concept. So we've always had the bud cover, and I think that's iconic. We don't want to run away from that, but we also again have to make the plant more approachable. So not everyone wants bud porn, you know what I mean? So we started the back cover as like a hand drawn like culture focused cover.
Okay.
And so since then we've been able to do some really cool things playing off the front and the back, and like I think just the whole experience of it. And actually, I will say the art issue, the one other special thing that's about it that we don't do in any other issues, obviously we always have the centerfold, but we have an extra centerfold in this one, which has original art from both artists on the front and the back, too. So like,
from also going all the way.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
super
that's
super
cool.
90s style, like
Right.
rip out the fucking poster, throw it on your wall. You know?
Okay, solid. So I'm excited to see all these new things coming out for High Times. I'm happy to see they have somebody that actually gives a fuck.
Thank you, bro. I appreciate you. I definitely give a fuck. And listen, we've basically rebuilt the team, or I basically rebuilt the team since I've been there. And everyone who works there gives a fuck. You know what I mean? Like loves the culture, like loves what they're doing. And none of us are, I don't want to talk shit, but like none of us are wealthy or like doing so well that like, you know, we don't need the job or anything like that. Like, but we love doing it. And like, I know that, you know, there's a lot of people who just kind of like, especially in this industry, who just kind of go to work. We do take a lot of pride in what we do. So like I said, like I take, you know, when people talk shit, like I take it very personally.
Yeah, for sure.
But, you know, also like, if there's like, we want the magazine to be representative of all of us. So like, we're mostly freelancer driven, but like, we're always taking suggestions and recommendations from the community because, like, again, like we can't be everywhere. We're a very small team. You know what I mean? So always hit us up. We're on every social media platform. And, we want to, you know, tell the stories you want to hear. So,
Ladies and gentlemen, the VP of Content, Jon Cappetta, in the building. Once again, I want to give a shout out to my sponsors real quick. Let me put them up on the screen one time. Let me give a shout out to Bust Down Worldwide, Happy Trees, Plain Jane, Shrubs, El Toro, and Sweets for constantly supporting the show. You can also catch this on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and YouTube. Bro, I really appreciate you for taking your time out to talk about just different things going on in the cannabis world and just ultimately just coming on the show.
my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I am very stoned, so I definitely feel like I rambled and jumped all over the place.
You're
so I
good.
apologize if I sounded like a fucking idiot. But thank you for having me.
Most definitely, bro. No, we're on point. You was online. You're good.
Hell yeah.
But thank you guys for tuning in to this episode of Bong Talk. I'm your host, Nappy2000. I'll see you guys soon.